we'll go ahead and get this started off. I'm going to introduce Kevin Guthrie, the president of ITHAKA, who's really going to lead our first presentation here today. Turn it over to you, Kevin.
Thanks very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here today and have an opportunity to talk about both JSTOR and ITHAKA's history, but also, more importantly, talking about our vision for the future and how that fits in with your needs and what you're looking for in what is a really dramatically challenging environment. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about first, our context in ITHAKA. So ITHAKA is kind of a family of services, all dedicated to trying to make education more widely accessible and knowledge more widely accessible in the world. We focus that in the education area, and our services are JSTOR, ArtStore, Portico, and ITHAKA S&R. And fundamentally, what connects us in the work that we do together is that we want to make education more widely accessible, but we also want to have higher impact. So we want to make things both better and cheaper. And that's kind of our mantra internally, is how do we make things better and cheaper? We're a not-for-profit organization trying to serve the interests of education, which obviously is more important today than it has ever been. Next slide. So I want to go back to the beginning of how we started and how JSTOR began. Our mission was originally a broadly framed mission, what I just said, how can we help use technology to make higher education more effective? We were founded in 1995 by the Mellon Foundation, and specifically as a vision of Bill Bowen, the president of the foundation at the time. And the idea was broad, but the specific thing we were doing was how do we make the content that was at that point locked up in print volumes more widely accessible by digitizing it and making it accessible across the web. The idea at that time was, that you have to realize it was back before Google, before the World Wide Web, before any of that. It was just that the content that was locked on shelves was inaccessible and expensive to maintain. Next slide. So when we had this concept, the idea started with this notion of a kind of triangular set of benefits. That is to say that this was going to benefit the entire community. It was benefits for everyone. So when we had this notion that we could digitize the back runs of scholarly journals all the way back to the first volume, first issue. So the benefits for libraries would be they would save resources by recovering all that shelf space and largely premium shelf space that was used for materials that were rarely used. Publishers' content could be revitalized by becoming digital. Convenient access would be possible for users, and revenue that was created from the savings that libraries would find on capital and operating costs could be shared with the publishers. So it was a positive economic gain for publishers as well, since they were not recovering any, since you all were not recovering any funds from the back files to speak of. And finally, users would benefit from having easy and valuable scholarly literature at their fingertips for research, teaching, and learning. So, and in fact, in the beginning, we really emphasized this, savings from shelf space more even than the notion of access. But once the content was made accessible, once it was searchable, once it was convenient to find, then you had users finding that there was enormous value in the back files, and of course usage of the resource has taken off, as we all know. So, but the thing I want to emphasize here is that the concept was that we could have benefits for everyone by employing the technology to do something new that would enhance access to the content. So that was the original vision, and that was what we executed on. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the phases of JSTOR's life, because it gets to the question of how do we operate within a broader context, and how does that context impact what we do and how we do it. So there really have been three kind of chapters in our existence. It started out in the very beginning. We were effectively a technology organization. We had to build our own technology. We have a colleague still here who actually wrote our first search engine. There wasn't a Google search engine. He basically wrote the index and search engine himself. In the beginning, we had to write helper applications that would convert TIFF files into files that could be printed on a printer. We had to develop our own scanning standards. And in fact, we had to create, working with digitization vendors who had never really done this before, the process for digitizing content. So we had to really make the technology that would make it work. And that was sort of the first, decade or so that we were doing that. And then what happened was the nature of the way we did our work, we were just adding more content to that existing technology. So we shifted into becoming really kind of a top content organization. And we licensed a platform from Adapon, the Literatum platform, for making the content available. And we really focused on adding more content. And from a technology point of view, we did a lot of technology work, but for the most part, we just wanted to use what was out there and kind of stay out of the way. So we added a lot of collections and a lot of scale during that period. And then, more recently, as we watched the world, as the context in which we were operating was, with adding more content, it was really just about that. And the idea of the way that JSTOR operated really was kind of as in effect, a broadcaster, right? You would search the content, you'd find an article, you'd download it, you'd use it. It was not a multi-directional environment. It was really just a one-way thing. JSTOR kind of hands off the articles to the user. And clearly the web during the sort of 2000s evolved away from just being, a place where things were published to a place of engagement, right? Where people both and institutions would contribute collections and engage and interact. And we saw that coming, and I want to emphasize, so how you, looking at your context and how you evolve, it became obvious that we at our level needed to be able to create a great user experience in order for the resource to continue to have value. That if it was just you download PDF articles from the web and print them, that was moving toward becoming a commodity. It was available, both legally and illegally on the web. And so if you were going to continue to build on the benefits of what JSTOR was from the very beginning, you had to innovate. You had to be able to move forward and take advantage of other aspects of what the web offered. So that's when we shifted over to make investments in becoming a product organization enabled by technology. So we sort of changed our whole culture and the way we do our work in order to try to create a great user experience and to start to evolve what was, the original vision for JSTOR more aggressively. So we also added books during that period as a new kind of content, and to demonstrate that we could bring users from one kind of content into another kind of content. Even if they didn't see the resource originally that way, we could connect them through the natural mechanisms of their work. They'd find books, and obviously that's proven to be very valuable. People find great book content, and as you all well know, for many users, the book content is in many ways even better than journal content for particular purposes. So, and for different purposes. So, that's something that's been an important development for us, being able to add a new format, if you will, to JSTOR. So the idea here is that we want to provide a platform that enables use, contribution, and engagement. It's not just using articles from the platform, but also having contributors engage and users engage in a multi-directional network kind of way. So that's why we made this change in sort of the third chapter of our existence. Next slide. So when you think about where you're going as an organization or as a publisher or even as a researcher, you always got to think about the context. That's what I'm trying to emphasize with this, is that your context keeps evolving and things change, and we operate in this technology-enabled world, in this networked environment, and we all know that the pace of innovation is unprecedented and relentless. Companies have to keep moving. I mean, what is sort of innovative one year, it used to be that would last for a decade or two or three. Now you're pushed in a matter of years to innovate and to add more value. And we see that in the movement all over, but in technology. And so that relentless innovation is both a challenge for those of us who are offering services, but obviously is a huge benefit for users many times. And so, you know, we see it in just imagining the difference between how you would do a research project when some of us went to school, you know, with going through the stacks in books to what it is now. And so these technology supported environments change the nature of the work that people do. So, you know, right now we have 3,000 secondary schools that have access to JSTOR. When I went to secondary school, like there was absolutely no way I would ever get any academic journal of any kind. And now 3,000 schools across the world have access to this content. And that means the nature of the work that those students can do is different. And that teachers will expect different kinds of work from them. And every year, every month, every day that passes, the opportunities for the nature of the work you can do change. And so now we're seeing, you know, the nature of the work that a college student does now is much more advanced from a research perspective than the work that was done 10 years ago or 20 years ago because of the access to content they have at their fingertips. So it's important for all of us to get that information into their workflows, into the opportunity for them to do that kind of work. So, you know, one of the areas that's happening is in the area of, you know, primary source materials. Increasingly, you know, professors and faculty and teachers are saying to students, you got to use primary source materials and make an original argument when you're doing your work. You can't just, you know, summarize several book chapters or journal articles into a story or into an argument. So it becomes important for these students to be able to get access relatively easy, and researchers to contents of different types. And so again, that's the context that that we feel operating around JSTOR that we're trying to anticipate and help both the publishers and the libraries and users take advantage of the technologies that are available. Next slide. So, you know, when we, you know, one area where we really felt it was important to advance. So, you know, we mentioned a couple minutes ago that we evolved to not just be journals, but add books and access to book content. This movement toward primary sources motivated us to think about how can we make primary sources available to users in easy ways so that they could do this new kind of work that was being demanded of them. You know, and it started really with the opportunity for us to bring, you know, our sister organization ArtStore into the ITHAKA family, which we did several years ago. And obviously the art images there are primary source objects that have value to scholarship. And we're working to integrate the experience. But primary sources more generally, we had a project called ILUCA that digitized content from and about Africa, and with enormous amounts of primary source materials there. And so we're trying to bring together these materials in a way similar to the way we added book chapters and books to JSTOR, to put images and primary source materials into the workflow and be smart about the way that we do that, so that users can find this primary source material and then compare it to the secondary literature and create new kinds of arguments and move between those formats. And that creates a benefit that goes both ways. Obviously, the primary source materials get seen, get used, but the secondary literature is enhanced by having access to these materials and for students to be able to take advantage of them. Next slide. So what we're trying to create now is a shared platform with inputs and engagement from multiple directions, so that those who have materials can upload them and make them available on this platform easily. Users can get access to them easily, and you get a sustainable platform that supports all. So, you know, from a contributor's point of view, whether that might be a library with a primary source collection or a publisher with a journal or books, et cetera, we want to create that environment, where people can know where these collections came from, where we can increase the access and usage and impact of that content by putting it into the research and learning workflows. And then we can provide a set of services. You know, some libraries, for example, may want help with preserving these primary source materials and special collections that they have put on the platform, or they may want help with digitization or adding metadata or things like that. And then when we put that on the platform and support a range of business models, the subscription models, open content, models like what we're doing with Reveal Digital, where libraries can pay a fee in order to put their content up and have it be available open access. So you want to bring onto this platform a range of economic models that creates a diversity of approaches that makes that more sustainable. So there are some cross subsidies going on, and everyone can benefit and in that sustained platform and environment. Next slide. One of the areas that we think we have an opportunity to really add value for everyone in this mix, and it may be especially contributors, is by investing in data mining, text and data mining, and that whole area. Obviously, it's a huge area that's growing in the scholarly world. That's one of the things that I would say about context. The ability to use data is becoming critically important going forward. We recently hired Seymour Douglas, who's now our VP of Data Analytics, and he's assembling a team that's going to be responsible or is responsible for analyzing data, and the goal here is to provide strategic insights to publishers, to libraries, to us, to users as we make these materials available. I think that investment can obviously help with search and discovery and continue to improve the user experience so that users are finding relevant material. But there are also real opportunities for what are users doing on JSTOR in particular disciplines? What might that say about decisions that publishers might make about future editorial work? What are the trends that we see in our usage data? What does that signal? And usage data specifically for each title or publisher or different kinds of parts of the world. These are data that could be helpful as you all work and move forward in understanding the context that informs your strategies and what you do operationally going forward. Next slide. So I want to conclude kind of back to where we started. We continue to see our work as a not-for-profit trying to take advantage of expanding access to technologies to make things both better and cheaper as a benefit for everyone that we're working with. So just to simplify, very, very much use the same kind of structure that I talked about with JSTOR. Libraries, again, with their primary source collections, with their special collections, can have those collections become revitalized by making them accessible in this environment where users are already doing their work. So we're making accessible in those archival boxes and on those shelves the digital version in the same kind of way that we did with the original back files of journals on their shelves. The publisher's content becomes integrated into the work of students and researchers in the new kind of work that they're doing that broadens reach. Your content now available at 3,000 secondary schools in a way never before. We have something like 750,000 uses on our JPass individual subscriptions service, and 10 million uses in register and read. So on that platform, being able to broaden the awareness and access and impact of your content while also doing that in an environment with multiple business models to support your activities going forward. And finally, obviously users find and easily use the valuable literature. They get access to primary source and secondary literature together to make new kinds of arguments that enhances their work and teachers' ability to teach. And in the end, just adding to the dissemination of knowledge and the creation of knowledge for everyone. So, we see the benefits of what we're doing as being very much the same in effect as they were in 1995. Just the tools and the environment and the context and the nature of the world that we're operating in evolving, and we're evolving with it. Nothing could be more dramatic than the pandemic and in revealing how context matters. Obviously, all of us operated in one way, and then a week later, we operated in a completely different way because the world around us changed. Most of the time, that happens very incrementally and very slowly. But we have to make the investments and take the steps to change and evolve with it, and that's what we're trying to do here at JSTOR and at ITHAKA. So we're happy and grateful that you all work with us in that endeavor, and I hope that we can we will work together to continue to enhance access and the dissemination of knowledge at lower and lower costs. So thanks, and I look forward to the conversation with further discussion with all of you over the next couple days. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Kevin. We have a couple polling questions now. We're gonna put up here for all of you, just to help us kind of get some feedback as well. And then we're gonna have a few questions that have come in, and we'll go ahead and kind of get started on going through the Q&A on those questions here in just a moment. So Kevin, one of the questions why people were kind of putting some polling feedback here. One of the questions that was coming up is around what the future of academic publishing is, what the future looks like for academic publishing, and how to monetize that content, or their content, was a question that came up. So something for you to kind of ponder on here for just a minute as we get through these polling questions.
Not exactly a softball there, John.
I know. It was a tough one to start.
I'll think about that.
Okay. So thanks everyone. If you're starting on the polling question where we had which of the values in the shared platform are most important to you as a publisher contributor. So hopefully you've all had a chance to get some feedback on that at this point. Great. Okay, so we have here increased access, usage, and impact on contributors' content. So multiple economic models. Okay, so I think, Kevin, it would be good for us to talk a little bit there that addresses some of the stuff you mentioned earlier. And Matt McQueen will be talking in some detail where you'll be able to see some of the things that we're doing on the platform that help increase usage. But Kevin, I'll go ahead and get to the second polling question, and then we can get some feedback on those. So the second polling question is, which JSTOR objective is most important to you? These are, Kevin commented on these earlier. Institutions see JSTOR as a valuable platform. Usage and engagement increases across all content types. Improve data-driven decision-making. So Kevin, based on, since we have some time here while they're filling the second polling question, any thoughts or views or comments you have on what you saw from the results on the first polling question?
Oh, well, I mean, I think it's reassuring to some degree that one of the things that we're really working hard on, which is increasing usage and impact, is important, right? So that's the thing that jumped out at me, the 71% there. Which says, hey, we're doing something that that we're in agreement and alignment on that, which is obviously important.
Great. All right, let's see what we have here on the second one. Pretty much in line with what we saw coming in with the first, is still a focus on usage and engagement across all content types. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you very much. The good thing here is you're really going to also want to hear from Matt in our second session. He will provide a good amount of detail and some information on exactly what we've been doing to support that. But now let's get back to that first question, the softball one there I threw at you at the start, Kevin, and see if you can give us an answer here.
Well, I mean, I think sort of what's the future of scholarship and how do you monetize content? I mean, this is the most difficult question, the challenging question. So I think that the first thing I would say, and again, I'm not being a publisher directly myself, quote unquote, or ourselves. So we bring the perspective that we bring as demonstrated by what I was just talking about in that session. But I think the thing to really focus on is, as you heard, is first value. Really focusing on where your published material adds value. So I think that's number one. and then starting to think about the context. So obviously we're all wrestling with a context in which open access is a really important direction, and we all, I think, as publishers, us as an enabler, view open access as a great thing, you know, in the idealized sense, right? I mean, more access is better. And if we could develop sustainable models that made access freely available around the world, that's better. I mean, that's more impact. As the little survey just showed, we care about impact and usage, but we have to do that in a sustainable way. So, so the question is, how do you develop ways to make content widely accessible as affordably as possible? My belief is that that the scholarly publishing is critically important, and when things are critically important, you know, they're valuable, then, you know, you focus on that value, and there will have to be a way to sustain it. And so one has to have, you know, sort of eyes and ears and everything open in order to position oneself to be able to leverage that value. But I think that the real focus first has to be on the value. Like, what is the value that that you're delivering? What are you best at? You know, we look to other industries, obviously look to the music industry and what's happened with that, but look at higher education. So, you know, there are places that are calling for free, you know, tuition-free access to colleges and universities. That's not going to happen soon. That may happen for community colleges. It may happen for some, but clearly the value of an education is such that tuition is going to continue to be paid for the foreseeable future by many folks. And I think that that's true for scholarly publishing as well. It's just so critically important that it's going to have to be paid for. Now, we also see that in publishing, you know, in newspaper publishing, et cetera. So now, to say that doesn't mean that all publishers can succeed by continuing to do things the way that they're doing them. So, you know, I think focusing on value, focusing on where that value is most important, figuring out ways to pay for that, and then, you know, having cross subsidies operating. So I do think that, you know, and I know you all are doing this already, but you know, working toward diverse revenue opportunities, having your content in multiple places for how it can be better monetized or the value be realized, are things that one needs to do and be aware of the benefits. So I do think in the end that if you say, like, what's the future of academic publishing, I think that it's going to continue to be promising because it's so important that it has to be done. That said, I do think that the nature of technology, which has lowered costs, especially on the margin for the publishing activities, is going to reduce the amount of money available in the industry, right? So we all have to figure out ways to do things that we do now less expensively, and shift our models so that we can continue to be sustainable with less money, a la the way that is happening in the music business. So the business doesn't go away, but it does get reduced, and so you have to figure out ways to do things less expensively and make sure that you're getting your content into the environments where usage is really happening. So those are my musings. I wish, you know, all of us had a single better answer to that question, because I do think we're facing some real challenges with the combination of technology and the sort of emphasis on open access. And these are obviously comments that are not taking into account, you know, what's going to happen in the next 1, 2, 3 years post-pandemic, which are going to be very, very challenging. So I think that's another obviously force that's going to operate against all of us and be challenging. But I think, you know, my answer is really about longer term questions of value.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that really gave a lot of good. No, it's a lot of good detail, though. Hopefully, for address the question that came in from the publisher and gives everybody some things to think about. As a follow-up, another question here really kind of builds off of that. Then would be, how can JSTOR and publishers make their journal and book content more accessible for countries in the developing world? And you've talked about open access and ways of keeping costs down. So you might be able to maybe expand on that a little bit and show, like, what about for countries in the developing world and for users who really don't have the ability to pay for any content now, and how we can make that content more accessible to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we obviously already do that. We have a developing nations initiative, and we have some countries and parts of the world where access to the JSTOR content is free. the institutions have to license it, but we don't charge for it. And I think that's the kind of thing that we ought to be doing as a not-for-profit, is figuring out ways to extend access and, if you will, cross-subsidize the potential for access. But I think the important other aspect of this is to keep reminding ourselves that free access or open access is a means to an end. It's not an end in of itself. And so, I think that's the thing that is challenging. So, the other role that we can help to play is not just to make the content freely available in the developing world, but then to have it on a platform where people are already using content, or, to be able to market that content to users in that area, or, to create tools or capabilities for the institutions, the libraries, the publishers, what have you, to make it so that more users are aware. And when you can make something free in a region and people will never even see it or hear about it because it comes up, 152,000th on a Google search, but you make it available through institutions, and then the library lets the faculty know it's there, and the faculty let the students know, and there's some commitment to it that makes it accessible. So just, I think that the opportunity goes beyond just, is access to the content free in the world or in a region, but how do people get connected to that content? How do people find it? How do people use it? How are they helped to use it? What other content is available in a way that's relevant? So there are, many aspects to getting to a place where content has impact. And open or free access is only one component. It's a means, as I said, to an end, not an end in of itself. Now, as I say that, I know that many people regard open as kind of an end in and of itself. And I think the challenge with that is that, we have to figure out a way to make things as widely accessible and then make it sustainable for publishers, for those who do the work to make the content, to facilitate that content and make it available. And so that's got to be remembered. It's not by many, but we have to keep emphasizing that importance. And I think at the end of the day, what happens, or what needs to happen, is a certain amount of cross subsidy. What I often say, and now I'm kind of sort of transitioning over to an open access commentary, but I often think about the fact that we as publishers or JSTOR start with a subscription model, and we try to make things more open. In other words, we've got a model that has worked to provide a sustainable activity, and we're trying to make it more and more free, if you will. So we're moving on a continuum from this sort of end of subscription toward more and more open. Open access initiatives and resources, et cetera, start with free, start open, and they're trying to figure out how to pay for it. So they're adding services, or they're making some things charged, et cetera. So they're moving, from open to more different kinds of models that can support them on an ongoing basis. We're all going to meet somewhere in the middle, some mix of some open, some paid, some services, some enabled technology, and in that middle space is where sustainable and open are coexisting to try to make content as accessible as possible, whether it's in the developing world or in the developed world.
Great, thanks, Kevin. They're just, I know we're just at time here. There's one more question maybe we can get to very quickly, and it was as a publisher with primary sources, and I know many of them have them. I've talked to many publishers, saw the primary sources. They're trying to do some of this and publishing this on their own. Can JSTOR be a place where they can make their content available?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the idea here is a little bit different with the primary source material, in that I think primary source material is not like published material where there's a kind of hierarchy of scholarly quality. Where there might be a ranking of how much something's cited or something like that. In some sense, primary source material, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Something that could be just considered garbage in one sense, something that was thrown away, posters on a wall or something like that, or whatever it might be, all of a sudden, if you're a scholar researching a particular moment in time, can be absolute gold to you. So the idea behind that is that you want to create mechanisms to make it easy for people to put the primary source material up, and then kind of ex post, you want to make it possible for users to find that content if it's relevant to what they're searching for. So I think, we are trying to make an investment to make it easy and straightforward for people to upload content onto the platform, primary source content, so you can get a lot of it. And so that once you have a lot of it, you can then start to index and do data mining on that primary source material, so we can reveal the relevant material to somebody doing a search on the secondary literature on other items, and they say, wow, I didn't even know this existed. Here's content that could be really valuable to me. So that's the goal. And so we'll be encouraging, all types of primary source material to come onto the platform, and we're going to try to make it as easy for that to happen and as inexpensive as possible to make that possible.
Great, thank you very much, Kevin. So I know, let's see, I know we're over time, everyone. There is one more question that came up. So if you all need to we're going to come back again at 11:15 to do another presentation here with Matt McQueen. But Kevin, do you mind posing the one more question? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So this was read and publish is sustainable, and with Plan S will increase flips to full OA. Some of these journals also exist in JSTOR. How are you considering and pricing for their value?
Well, we haven't really, made decisions on those types of things yet. Obviously this is an evolving model, and it's going to be, the obvious challenge here is that when you make these shifts, you start to see, the shift to the supply side, if you will, right? And so you start to see, concentration of payments happening on the research side for research institutions, and those are going to be challenging. To me, I wouldn't pick one model, because I think things are going to evolve and change as people go forward. I think the thing for us is that, we are seeing more and more open content. So how do we think about the payments for open content going forward, right? And so, we have some models, and I think at the end of the day, we're going to have some subscription type models on an ongoing basis, subsidizing open models, and so that's kind of our current way of looking at that, which has to keep evolving. Now, publishers, you all have a lot of experience with that, because you effectively have done that in certain ways with APCs and that part of the transition. I just don't think that the jury is in yet on the sort of this new model, and so we're watching it carefully, and we don't yet have a short answer to that in the JSTOR context.
Thanks, Kevin. So looks like that's all we have for questions. So again, Kevin, thank you very much for your time and putting this presentation together, and for answering the questions, and for all the publishers, thank you very much for providing those questions up front, for your attendance. And Kevin, I'll turn it to you if you want to do any last comments here before we wrap up.
Yeah, I'm glad to participate. I hope it's helpful in some small way, and I look forward to the next couple of days and learning from all of you, and learning from the whole engagement around these issues. So thanks for having me, John, and I look forward to the continued conversation.